All right, Panther fans. So today, as promised, as part of our continuing series of player grades on the Panthers from last season, today I bring you Matthew Tkachuk. Now, yesterday I kind of joked about he's going to get 3 grades. And as I looked at things, he's definitely getting 2 grades. Now, this one's going to be a little bit more in depth than yesterday's bark off video because there's a lot of context to go over, right? So we know at the start of the season, the grade I was going to give him, and follow me here, the grade I was going to give him for the first section of the season was a BS. And the reason why I was going to give it a BS was because with him saying he was 100%, I call BS. And during the season, something happened that made me, I was the only one who said this. I'm not bragging or saying I was right or wrong. It was just my thing. I'm the one that said, aha, wait a minute. Right there. That just happened. This is what's happened, and this is what's going to happen. And I went back, and I dotted all my I's and crossed my T's and make sure that what I was talking about actually happened, and it happened when I thought it did, and it did. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to just give the full stats for his regular season. 80 games, 26 goals, 62 assists for 88 points. He had a plus minus a plus 19. Now, there's a couple stats that I want to point out here, which seem very counterintuitive to usually if you do one thing, the other thing is going to happen. But in this case, the opposite happened. Last year for Tkachuk, he had only 68 hits. Okay? This year, Chucky had 151 hits, which is odd because I would think if any of us would just from memory think about was he laying more hits this year versus last year, we would have said the previous year, or at least I would have. So he had almost 100 more hits this season. However, he managed to reduce his penalty minutes from 123 last year to only 88 this year. So somehow he more than doubled the number of hits he was giving while taking about 30% fewer penalties. I have nothing for that other than good job, Chucky. That stat alone right there deserves an A+. And you go over the rest of his statistics here. He had 6 power play goals. He had 2 game-winning goals. Now, another stat that I want to talk about is his shot percentage. This past season, his shot percentage was 9.3, which was actually the lowest of his career except for his rookie season where he was at 9.2. Now, his total shot attempts didn't go down very much. Last year was 536. This year was 500. But his shot percentage went down from 12.4 last year to 9.3 this year, which basically the difference in that shot percentage is what accounts for the difference in goals of 40 last year, 26 this year. Now, his time on ice went down by just about 2 minutes. Last season, 20:26, and this most recent season, 18:38. So there was a large, huge, monumental difference. I mean, 2 minutes a night when you start talking about these top-level players is a big difference. Again, I attribute that to the depth on the team. You can throw the Lundell line out there, and it's going to be fantastic. And what's interesting about this statistic, that his time on ice went down, is that if you remember for the first couple months of the season, a lot of times when we had a power play, he would play the entire 2 minutes. He was playing on the first and the second unit. So he was getting all that extra power play time, but yet his time on ice went down by just about 2 minutes. So again, 26 goals, 62 assists, 88 points. That's the least amount of points he's had in a few seasons, but overwhelmingly, the majority of that can be explained away by his shot percentage. His shot percentage his last year in Calgary was 16.6. Then it was 12.4 last year. Now it's 9.3. Now, there's some reasons for that. The Paul Maurice system combined with Chucky's injury, and we'll get into that a little bit. Now, the playoffs. Well, before we get into we'll go over the playoffs, and then we'll go into what I was talking about earlier. 24 games, 6 goals, 16 assists, 22 points. He was even on the plus minus. But again, a couple of things get pointed out. All right. Last year, in 20 games, 74 penalty minutes. This year, 24 games, so 4 more games, 31 penalty minutes. Less than half the penalty minutes in 4 more games. That is an astronomical difference. His time on ice in the playoffs went down by 3 minutes. Previous year was 21:37. This last year was only 18:29. And also the same thing happened with his shot percentage. His shot percentage in last year's playoff, 18%. This year, 7.2. So as good as he was last year during the regular season, he significantly elevated his game, especially his shot percentage during the playoffs, where with this season, his shot percentage was not Tkachuk-esque during the regular season and even got worse in the playoffs. Now, it's not necessarily a complaint or a gripe, just pointing that out. Now, I'm going to give you the part that I'm talking about, and some of you probably remember what I was saying earlier in the season. I went back and I remembered this happening, and I thought I remembered the game, and I went back and I watched my recaps, and it was the Tampa Bay game, the game against the Lightning on December 27th. Now, this is game 31-32, and at this point, Tkachuk has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's got like 5 goals in the first 30-something games. He doesn't really look like himself. He's got some assists, but like we've been talking about with that shot percentage, the dexterity, the hand-eye coordination in front of the net to make those quick movements with his wrist to pop the puck into the net from up close, it just wasn't happening. It took him that extra quarter of a second. And if you give a goalie the extra quarter of a second, he's likely to make the stop, or Tkachuk was missing, or just not being able to do with the puck what he was normally doing. Then, against the Lightning in the second period, December 27th, what happened during that game was Tkachuk laid into somebody with his shoulder, and he went right to the locker room. He was hanging that arm a little bit low, right to the locker room. I assume got a vitamin D shot, and then boom, came back onto the ice. And what I talked about at the end of that recap in the subsequent videos was that I think he busted scar tissue when that happened. I've talked about this before. You hear football running backs talk about this, especially in the old days when they would get an ACL or they would have something that they'd have to have cut up on their knee. They would do the rehab and they would be playing and they would be kind to themselves, but not quite. And then a play would happen. They'd take a hit or they'd plant their leg and they would feel this excruciating pain in their knee. And they think, oh my God, I busted my knee again. But what in reality what was happening was the scar tissue was breaking up. And once that scar tissue would break up, the running back would feel a lot more flexibility, feel a lot more like themselves, and their statistics would start to show that. So when Chucky laid that hit with his shoulder, that's what I thought I saw happen, because after that, he had the Tampa Bay game and no goals. Then against the Rangers in Montreal, the next couple of games, no goals, but 2 assists, 1 assist. Then a goal against Arizona, a goal against Vegas, a goal against Colorado, a hat trick against St. Louis, a goal against the Kings. All of a sudden, Chucky was back. So the grade that I was going to give him as BS, that he was 100%, I'm still going to make it a BS, but I'm going to say before scar tissue, before the scar tissue broke on that shoulder and after the scar tissue, because I don't believe that was by accident. Obviously, I'm never going to have a one-on-one conversation with the dude, and even if I did while he's playing, he's never going to admit to that being what happened. But based on my limited knowledge in terms of what I could see on the TV and the results, I would be willing to bet big money that when he laid that hit with his shoulder, busting up that scar tissue, because all of a sudden he was himself again. So the rest of the season, right? So we're 31, 32 games in. He's got like 5 goals. And then as we know, he ended up, what did he end up with? 26 goals in 80 games. So he ended up with about another 20 goals in the final 45-ish games, something like that, which is much more used to the average that we're used to with him. So before the scar, his BS grade at the first 31 games, I'm just going to give him a BS, all right? Because he wasn't 100%. There was no way he was 100%. Now, that's another thing I want to go over here before I get into the playoff statistics. We won the cup, so everything that everybody did was the right move. So I'm not criticizing him there. Personally, I think that long-term wise, his long-term prospects for his career probably took a ding because he decided to come back and continue to play from game one. Now, some of that is going to be his personality. Like we've talked about, the plan was to get him some rest, and he was going to play in game 7 against the Knights with a broken sternum. So I'm not criticizing him. I think some of that also was he felt like no Ekblad, no Montour. It was his responsibility to be out there. Hindsight being 2020, we won the cup, so I'm not going to complain about it. But from a long-term perspective of his career, I kind of might have thought maybe he should have sat out those first couple of months, right? Maybe sit out basically as long as Ekblad and Montour had done. Would we have been in a position to be, in the playoff spot that we were in? I mean, maybe. He wasn't scoring a lot, okay? Don't know who would have taken his place. And like I said, it's not a major complaint, but to me, it's more of a statement of his tenacity and his belief and his commitment to the team and the franchise and his players that he plays with and the community and the fan base and everything else. It just speaks to his commitment, because I'm sure the doctors kind of said, look, Chucky, yes, technically you can play, but maybe it would be better for your long-term health if you sat out, and he did not. Now, another thing I want to get into with him before we get to the playoffs, we did the playoff stats, but another thing I want to mention is that I don't know whose idea it was. I don't know if it was Chucky. I don't know if it was Maurice. I don't know if it was another coach. But we all saw Tkachuk start laying hits with his butt, right? He would back into guys, and you lay a hit with your back end or your hip, which doesn't really surprise me, because how many guys busted up their shoulders Maurice's first year, right? So I don't know whose idea that was specifically, but they deserve a lot of credit for, as we went into the playoff and the cup run, everybody stayed healthy, right? I mean, Bennett missed the games. He broke the hand, with the puck hitting it, but everybody else stayed healthy, forwards and defensively. So some of the adjustments that the team made, the coaches, whoever's idea it was, they deserve some credit. Now, in terms of an overall grade, before Tkachuk laid that hit, I'm not even going to grade him at that point, because in my view, I don't really know if he should have been out on the ice. I'm not going to grade him based on that performance. The rest of the season, he was pretty much A+ Tkachuk. Now, he was different A+ Tkachuk, but he was still A+ Tkachuk. And what I mean is, he wasn't scoring a lot. Okay, he wasn't scoring at the same clip. And the shots up close, right? The getting the puck at the side of the net and it's in the net, that did not come back. But he did get much better defensively. He took a hell of a lot less penalties, and I think overall he led the way in bringing down we'll just call it, quote, dirty play. He led the way in bringing that down a couple of notches. Okay. We had this reputation of being a dirty team, but when you look at how we ended up having to beat Edmonton, the supposed dirty players, right? They really weren't being dirty. Cousins wasn't even on the ice. Lomberg was just kind of out there, not doing anything obnoxious. So I think Tkachuk kind of led the way there. You know what I mean? There was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. His first season, everything was new, everything was going so well towards the end, and things might have got a little bit, a few too many, late hits in the scrums after the whistle and everything like that. Tkachuk really tempered that down and found other ways to be effective, and it won us a cup, and that's really the bottom line. Now, in terms of his playoff performance, when I compare last year to this year, the two numbers that stick out are the penalty minutes from 74 to 31 and the shot percentage from 18 to 7. He had 2 game-winning goals in the playoffs. So now 6 of the 16 game-winning goals were Barkov and Tkachuk. I can't give him anything more than an A, really. Now, with Barkov, it was a little bit more difficult to decide A plus, A plus. I'm going to just give Tkachuk an A. You would almost give him an A plus, but that shot percentage, that is a little bit of a concern. Now, like I said, I know he's filled out other portions of his game, and if he continues to do that, I think it would be worthy of an A plus. I'm not saying I'm giving him an incomplete, but depending on how he looks this next season, that could adjust how I look at what he did this season. So if he comes back next season and his shot percentage is back up to 11, 12%, then you could look at this year and say, okay, that was a temporary flaw, so maybe he didn't deserve an A+. If he's permanently now in that 9 to barely 10% zone, and he permanently doesn't have the same dexterity with his hands and in close to score those goals, then the rest of his career is going to be defined how he can define himself, how he can kind of redefine himself, right? He's not going to be leaning into guys taking, giving hits with his shoulder. So I like what he's done in terms of changing things and being able to make those hits with his hips and his ass, right? Call it the butt hit, whatever you want to call it. We need a good nickname for that. You know what I mean? But bottom line is A. Can't give him anything less, and I don't really know what more you could ask from him unless at some point coach decided that he was going to kill penalties, right? Remember in Huberdeau's last year, I believe this is correct. I believe it was Huberdeau's last year, that President's Trophy season, where he decided he wanted to add value to his game by killing penalties. I think I remember that accurately. Is Tkachuk going to do that? I mean, maybe. He's not the fastest guy in the world. He's not overly fast in terms of, short bursts, having to, adjust his skating. He may not be a good enough skater to be a penalty killer. I'm sure he'd be willing to do it if we needed him, but I don't know that that's going to be his role. I think at this point, he just needs to kind of figure out, kind of in the same way Ekblad had to figure out, it's like, okay, I can't keep pinching like this because I'm slow. I'm really slow. I was already slow, but now I'm really slow. And Ekblad, save a couple of episodes, Ekblad, for the most part, has learned I need to stay back here. Now, it looks like Tkachuk has either temporarily or permanently adjusted his game and what he's going to bring based upon how that shoulder is going to react long term. He's, again, not going to get a full, quote, off season. I mean, he's not going to be injured, so he should be able to, put some strength back on, put a little bit of weight back on. He should come into this season, obviously, in better shape than he was last year. What parts of his game is he going to leave behind? What parts of his game is he going to bring forward? And that brings us to the last question, which talked about with Barkov yesterday. Has Tkachuk peaked? it's quite possibly that offensively, goal-wise, he's peaked. It's quite possible. Not so much because of an age thing, but with the injury and with what we need from him on this team. Okay, we don't need him to score 40 goals. What we need him to do is what he did the second half of the season and during the playoffs, which is be a guy that this is what we need. This is what we need a goal. Okay, now we get a goal, right? We need heavy forecheck. We need somebody to not even worry about the offensive side and just go get the puck in the corner. Be what we need. So with the guys with the offensive talent we have on this team, aside from Tkachuk, Barkov's good for 25, 30. Verhaeghe's going to be good for 30 or 40. Reinhart's going to be good for 30 or 40. Bennett's in that 20-ish range, right? So we don't need Tkachuk necessarily to be a 40-plus goal guy like he was. He could reach that point again, but I have a feeling, based on what he has talked about in interviews, I believe that he is becoming somebody. He wants to emulate kind of Barkov a little bit, in the sense that he wants to take greater and greater pride in his defensive end of the game. And he did that this year, and we won the cup. And so there's no complaints. Yesterday we talked about with Barkov, if he can personally challenge himself to get the 40 goals, 60% in the faceoff circle. What I would say with Tkachuk to personally challenge himself is, can he keep those penalty minutes low? And can he find a way to either one of two things? Either let's get that shot percentage back up, okay? Or let's work on your distribution. Not that it was bad, but if you're not going to give us 40 goals, maybe we can get you to be a normal, 70, 60, 70, 80 assist type of guy, right? Maybe you can adjust your game that way. Depends on what he wants to do. Main thing is we need him to stay healthy and stay happy and stay focused. And I love what I saw in terms of the time on ice being lowered on him. Again, that speaks to the depth of this team. That's two players we've done so far this year. Barkov, Tkachuk, both had their minutes reduced. And not by just a little bit. Both had their minutes reduced, and we won the cup. That's why Anton Lundell got paid. And I know I keep coming back to him. I talked about this during the cup, and you saw it when he was out. The advantage that we have when other teams with that caliber of a player on our third line cannot be understated. It's what keeps guys like Barkov and Bennett and Tkachuk from having to play 22, 23 minutes a night because the third line is ass. Instead, now these guys are playing 18, 19 minutes a night because you throw Lundell's line out there, and even against top competition, you're in good shape. So that's why Lundell got paid, in my opinion. All right. That's going to do it for today. Appreciate all the support. Hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Live stream Friday. It won't be tomorrow because I think Colin and I are going to go to an auction. So we're going to try to shoot for a live stream on Friday. And then I should have a members podcast out later. If I don't have it out today, it will definitely be tomorrow. Appreciate all the support. See you again soon.